Welcome to our series on the Westminster Confession of Faith. We are glad that you are here. In the previous section, the confession taught that it is lawful for Christians to serve as civil magistrates, and that those who govern must maintain piety, justice, and peace, and may even wage just war. Section 3 now marks the boundary of that authority. The civil magistrate, however godly, may not take to himself the work that belongs to the Church, the administration of the word and sacraments, and the power of the keys. Instead, the magistrate is to protect the Church of our common Lord and the liberty of all his people. In this lesson, we will see where the power of the state ends and the freedom of the Church begins. Section 2 showed us the Christian magistrate at work, bearing the sword for justice and peace, and even waging just war upon necessary occasion. A pressing question follows. If God ordains the magistrate and arms him with such power, how far does that power reach? May the ruler also govern the Church, define true doctrine, administer the sacraments, or punish people for their beliefs? In the original text of this confession in 1646, the magistrate was indeed given authority in religion, to take order that heresies be suppressed, and to call church synods. In 1788, the American Presbyterians, whose revised text the Presbyterian Church in America now holds, changed this section substantially. The correction is not that the divines were careless with Scripture, but that one application of their teaching, the coercive establishment of religion, came to be seen as out of step with the spiritual nature of Christ's kingdom. Christ alone is King of his Church. The magistrate's calling is to protect the Church, not to govern her spiritual life. Section 3 draws that line with care. Let us now read the text of Westminster Confession, chapter 23, section 3. Civil magistrates may not assume to themselves the administration of the word and sacraments, or the power of the keys of the kingdom of heaven, or, in the least, interfere in matters of faith. Yet, as nursing fathers, it is the duty of civil magistrates to protect the Church of our common Lord, without giving the preference to any denomination of Christians above the rest, in such a manner that all ecclesiastical persons, whatever, shall enjoy the full, free, and unquestioned liberty of discharging every part of their sacred functions without violence or danger. And, as Jesus Christ hath appointed a regular government and discipline in his Church, no law of any commonwealth should interfere with, let or hinder the due exercise thereof among the voluntary members of any denomination of Christians, according to their own profession and belief. It is the duty of civil magistrates to protect the person and good name of all their people, in such an effectual manner as that no person be suffered, either upon pretense of religion or of infidelity, to offer any indignity, violence, abuse, or injury to any other person whatsoever, and to take order that all religious and ecclesiastical assemblies be held without molestation or disturbance. The confession begins with a clear limit. Civil magistrates may not assume to themselves the administration of the word and sacraments, or the power of the keys of the kingdom of heaven. These are the spiritual offices that Christ gave to his Church, not to the state. Baptism and the Lord's Supper may be administered only by a minister of the word lawfully ordained. The preaching of the word is committed to those called and ordained to that office. And the keys of the kingdom are exercised through the Church's officers and courts. When King Uzziah presumed to enter the temple and burn incense, a work reserved for the priests, he was withstood and judged. The priests told him that it was not for him to burn incense to the Lord, but for the priests alone. Paul says that ministers are to be regarded as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. The magistrate may protect the Church, but he may never take up her sacred trust. The sword and the keys are different powers, given by the one Lord for different ends. The confession adds that the magistrate may not, in the least, interfere in matters of faith. Faith is not subject to the sword. Jesus told Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews." Christ does not advance his reign by coercion or by the power of the state. When they were commanded to stop preaching, Peter and the apostles answered, "We must obey God rather than men." The magistrate cannot bind the conscience, define doctrine, or compel belief, for these belong to God alone. who, as the confession teaches elsewhere, is Lord of the conscience. This does not mean the ruler is irreligious, or that faith is a private triviality. It means that true religion is spiritual, received by the Word and the Spirit, and never produced by fines, prisons, or armies. Coercion cannot create genuine faith. The magistrate serves God best in matters of religion, not by ruling the church, but by leaving her free from his control in matters of faith, while still protecting her peace and liberty. Having marked what the magistrate may not do, the confession turns to a positive duty. As nursing fathers, it is the duty of civil magistrates to protect the church of our common Lord. The phrase nursing fathers comes from Isaiah's promise that kings would care for God's people. The English Standard Version renders it, "Kings shall be your foster fathers, and their queens your nursing mothers." The older translation that the confession follows reads nursing fathers. The image is one of care and protection, not ownership or ecclesiastical lordship. A nursing father provides and protects. He does not become the head of the household of faith. So the magistrate is to guard the church's peace and freedom, to shield her from violence, and to maintain the public order in which the gospel can be freely preached and believed. He is a protector, not a head, a guardian, not a lord. The true head of the church is Christ alone, and every Christian ruler serves under him, never above the church as her master. The confession says this protection is to be given without giving the preference to any denomination of Christians above the rest. Here we feel the weight of the American revision. In many lands, and in the original confession, the state established one church and favored it above others. The American Presbyterians, having seen both the blessings of liberty and the abuses of state religion, revised this section to renounce such favoritism. The magistrate is to protect all the churches of our common Lord even-handedly, so that all ecclesiastical persons, whatever may enjoy the full, free, and unquestioned liberty of discharging every part of their sacred functions without violence or danger. This is not religious indifference, as though all beliefs were equally true. It is the conviction that Christ rules his church by his word and spirit, not by the favor of governments. Genuine faith does not depend on state support and is not produced by it. It is the gift of God, received through the gospel. The confession grounds this liberty in Christ's own appointment. As Jesus Christ hath appointed a regular government and discipline in his church, no law of any commonwealth should interfere with, let, or hinder the due exercise thereof among the voluntary members of any denomination of Christians according to their own profession and belief. The word let here is an older English word, meaning to obstruct or hinder. Christ has given his church her own government, her officers, her courts, and her discipline. The state is not to obstruct that government as the church exercises her discipline among her voluntary members, according to their own profession and belief. Notice the word voluntary. In the confession it means that membership in a church is not imposed by the state as a civil status, and that the magistrate may not compel anyone into or out of a communion. Adults profess the faith freely, and the visible church also embraces the children of believers according to God's covenant promise. The psalmist records God's own charge concerning those he had set apart. "Touch not my anointed ones, do my prophets no harm." The magistrate honors Christ by leaving his church free to be governed by Christ. The confession then widens the magistrate's protective duty to every person. It is the duty of civil magistrates to protect the person and good name of all their people, in such an effectual manner that no one, whether upon pretense of religion or of infidelity, is allowed to offer any indignity, violence, abuse, or injury to anyone else. This is remarkable. The magistrate protects not only Christians, but all of his people, even those who reject the faith. No one may be harmed under the cover of religion, and no one may be harmed under the cover of unbelief. Zeal for God is never a license to abuse a neighbor, and neither is hostility to religion. The ruler bears the sword, as Paul teaches, serving God for the good of his people, to restrain evil and to defend the innocent. A society ordered under God is one where people are not assaulted for what they believe, where reputations are not destroyed by slander, and where the weak are shielded from the violent. Finally, the confession charges the magistrate to take order that all religious and ecclesiastical assemblies be held without molestation or disturbance. This protection extends to all peaceful religious assemblies, and it is a civil safeguarding of public order, not the state's endorsement of any gathering's doctrine. The magistrate does not lead the assembly or dictate its worship, but he guards the doors, so to speak, so that the church may meet without fear of riot, intimidation, or attack. Paul urges that prayers be made for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. That quiet and peaceable life is exactly the public order the magistrate is to maintain. Here we see the beauty of distinct callings rightly kept. The church wields the keys, the state wields the sword. The church preaches the word, the state preserves the peace. Each serves the one Lord in its own sphere, and when the magistrate protects the worship of God without presuming to govern it, both the church and the commonwealth are blessed. As we discuss this section, consider how it shapes our thinking about the church and the state. Why is it important that the magistrate may not administer the word and sacraments or wield the keys of the kingdom? And what happens to the church when rulers cross that line? The confession calls the magistrate a nursing father who protects the church without preferring one denomination above the rest. How should Christians think about religious liberty for all people, including those who do not share our faith? And since the state is to protect the church but never to govern her, how can we honor and pray for our rulers while guarding the freedom that belongs to Christ's church alone? Let us gather up the lesson. Westminster Confession, chapter 23, section 3 teaches that civil magistrates may not assume to themselves the administration of the word and sacraments, or the power of the keys of the kingdom of heaven, or in the least interfere in matters of faith. Instead, as nursing fathers, they are to protect the church of our common Lord without preferring any denomination above the rest, to leave Christ's church free to be governed by Christ among her voluntary members, to protect the person and good name of all people, whether religious or not, and to keep every religious assembly free from disturbance. The sword and the keys are distinct powers, given by the one Lord for different ends. Next, in section 4, the confession will turn to our side of this relationship, the duty of the people to pray for their magistrates, to honor them, to pay them their due, and to obey their lawful commands, remembering that a ruler's lawful authority is not made void by a difference in religion, and that no church office exempts anyone from lawful civil obedience, even as the magistrate himself remains bound not to govern the church,